I'm Clayton, 42 male. For my entire life, I've been the other son. I work in logistics managing shipping routes in Portland, Oregon. It's a good life, an honest one, but it's always been lived in the shadow of my twin brother Roland, the golden heir to our family's $90 million real estate empire. But 3 months after our parents' funeral, a single phone call from a genetics lab I'd never heard of didn't just crack my world open. It shattered the very foundation of my identity. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. For 42 years, I was Roland Harris's twin. He was born 2 minutes before me, and in our family, those 120 seconds made him the heir and me the afterthought. Our father, Gerald, was a titan who built his real estate empire from a single apartment building. Our mother, Monica, came from old money that valued bloodlines and appearances above all else. Together, they were Portland royalty, and Roland was their crown prince. I was different. While Roland looked just like our father's sharp jaw, calculating eyes, I was told I must take after some forgotten relative. While he went to Stanford and Harvard Business School to learn how to manage the family fortune, I went to Portland State to study maritime logistics. My world was cargo manifests and shipping containers. His was stock portfolios and waterfront development deals. Roland just closed the Riverside deal, my father would boom at dinner, raising a glass. That's my boy. I'd be sitting right there, but I might as well have been invisible. This dynamic was our normal. Roland got the BMW at 16, I got Dad's old Honda. Roland's mansion sprawled over 10 acres, my apartment overlooked the harbor. He married Margaret, a senator's daughter. I was the perpetual bachelor, the spare son. I wasn't so much bitter as I was resigned. You don't get angry at the sun for rising. Then our parents died. A car accident on an icy road in Switzerland during their 45th anniversary trip. At the funeral, Roland stood beside me, the perfect picture of the grieving son who now had to carry the family legacy. "We're all we have left now, Clay," he said, gripping my shoulder. A week later, we sat in the mahogany and leather office of Maxwell Drummond, our father's attorney for 30 years. Maxwell read the will, his voice carefully neutral as he delivered the final legal confirmation of my life's status. "The entirety of the estate," he read, "all real estate, investment portfolios, and personal property goes to Roland Chase Harris." The silence in that room was deafening. Margaret studied her manicure. Roland shifted in his chair. Finally, he spoke. "Maxwell, there must be something for Clayton." Maxwell cleared his throat, unable to meet my eyes. "There's a small life insurance policy, $50,000, it's separate from the estate." $50,000 from a $90 million fortune. It wasn't just an insult, it was a joke. It was the price tag my parents had put on their other son. It was less than my father spent on a single weekend yacht rental. As we walked out of the office and into the cold Portland drizzle, Roland put his arm around my shoulder. He wasn't cruel about it, he was just stating a fact the same way he'd state the weather. "Don't worry, Clay," he said, his voice full of the easy confidence that came from a lifetime of winning. "I'll take care of you. Mom and Dad, well, they always loved me more, you know that, but you're still my brother." "You're still my brother." The words echoed in my head as I drove back to my small apartment. He was right. They had loved him more. It was the fundamental truth of our lives. But sitting there, looking out at the cargo ships moving slowly on the water, I finally allowed myself to ask why. What was the invisible mark I'd carried since birth that made one twin worth everything and the other worth less than a rounding error? 3 months passed. Roland's idea of taking care of me was a single check for $50,000 mailed to my apartment with a short typed note. "This should help with things." I deposited it, paid off my car loan, and went back to work at Cascade Freight Lines. My supervisor, Glenn, was sympathetic. "Must be tough losing both your parents like that," he said. I just nodded. I couldn't explain that the hardest part wasn't losing them. It was the confirmation that, in their eyes, I'd never really been theirs to lose in the first place. I wasn't angry about the money, not really. I was angry about what it represented, 42 years of being the afterthought, the spare part, the disappointment. Now it was all finalized in a legal document. I was officially and financially the lesser son. I tried to move on, to accept this as the final chapter of my relationship with my parents. I was Clayton Har. Is the logistics manager, the guy who lived in his brother's shadow. That was my story. I had made my peace with it. Then, on a perfectly normal Thursday morning while I was reviewing shipping manifests, my phone rang. An unknown number with a Vermont area code. The phone call that would prove my entire life, my entire identity, was a lie. Mr. Clayton Harris. The woman's voice was professional, but I could hear a nervous tremor under the clinical tone. This is he, I said, setting down my coffee. My name is Dr. Pamela Reeves. I'm calling from Helix Genetic Archives. We're calling because we have your DNA sample on file from 1989. I almost laughed. I think you have the wrong person. I've never given a DNA sample. Our records show your parents submitted it when you were 7, Mr. Harris, she insisted. It was part of an early childhood genetic study. We've been digitizing our historical samples, and yours was flagged when it was run against our current database. A cold feeling started in my stomach. Flagged how? Is this a health issue? There was a long pause. Not exactly. This is highly unusual. It concerns your brother, Roland, as well. He recently submitted a sample for ancestry analysis. When we ran his new sample against our historical database, it flagged your 1989 file. The comparison revealed something that shouldn't be possible. What shouldn't be possible? I would strongly prefer to discuss this in person, Mr. Harris, she said, her voice dropping. How soon can you be here? I told my boss I had a family emergency and got in my car. The drive from Portland, Oregon to Burlington, Vermont would be impossible, but I realized she meant the regional office in Burlington, Washington. The 4-hour drive was a blur. My mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. A rare genetic disease, a mix-up at the lab. I kept thinking about something my mother said years ago at my college graduation. She'd had too much champagne and got weepy. She grabbed my arm and said, "You have no idea what we sacrificed for this family, Clayton. No idea what we had to accept." I'd always assumed she meant financial sacrifices before my father hit it big. Now I wasn't so sure. I thought about the family photos. Roland, a carbon copy of our father, me, with my different eyes and different smile. I thought about how every photo of us as babies looked staged, like two random infants placed side by side because the photograph needed to exist. When I pulled up to the glass and steel building of Helix Genetic Archives, my hands were shaking. I was about to learn the truth about why my parents had looked at me my entire life like I was a ghost they were forced to feed. Dr. Reeves met me in the lobby. She was a small woman with kind, worried eyes behind thick glasses. She led me to a sterile conference room, and my gaze immediately fell on two thick manila folders on the table. The labels read, CHARRIS 1989 and RHARRIS 2024. Thank you for coming so quickly, she said, gesturing for me to sit. You said my brother submitted a sample. Yes, for ancestry, likely related to fertility planning with his wife. That's what triggered this. When we ran his sample, our system automatically compared it to the 1989 sample we had on file for a Roland Harris. But it also cross-referenced your 1989 sample, filed the same day, under the same family, listed as twin brother. She opened both folders, spreading out charts covered in genetic markers. Mr. Harris, I'm just going to be direct. According to these results, you and Roland Harris share 0 genetic overlap. The air left my lungs. 0, that's impossible. We're twins, fraternal twins, but twins, we have birth certificates. We were born on the same day. That's the problem, Dr. Reeves said, pushing a document toward me. Even fraternal twins share on average 50% of their DNA. You and Roland share nothing. You are not related at all. I stared at the numbers, my mind refusing to process them. So, we're both adopted. She shook her head slowly. It's far more complicated than that. This is your 1989 file. Your blood type is O negative. She then pointed to another file. We have your parents' medical records from the study. Both Gerald and Monica Harris were OB positive. I wasn't a geneticist, but I knew basic biology. That's not possible, is it? No, she said softly. It is genetically impossible for two OB positive parents to have an O negative child. But Roland's blood type is consistent with theirs. A wave of dizzying, bitter clarity washed over me. So he's their son, and I'm not. That's it. That's why the way they treated me, I was never their son at all. Mr. Harris, please, she said, holding up a hand. There's more. We dug deeper. Roland's DNA is consistent with being their child by blood type, but his ancestry is all wrong. Your parents were both of Northern European descent. And Irish, German, English. Roland's DNA is predominantly Persian and Lebanese. I couldn't speak. But your DNA, she continued, shows the exact European ancestry consistent with the Harris family line. You have genetic markers we would expect to see in Gerald Harris's biological child. But Monica Harris cannot be your biological mother. She slid one last document across the table. It was a hospital record from 1982. According to this, Monica Harris gave birth to one child that day, not two. We checked your birth certificate. It was filed 2 weeks after Roland's, and the attending physician's signature is a forgery. She leaned forward, her eyes full of pity. Mr. Harris, neither of you is their biological child in the way you think, and someone forged your entire identity. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a full hour, the engine off. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I wasn't a Harris. But I was a Harris. Roland wasn't a Harris. My entire life, my entire sense of self had been a lie. My 42 years of feeling less than wasn't insecurity, it was the result of a deliberate, calculated fraud. I was the living reminder of something, but what? Dr. Reeves had given me copies of everything. The DNA reports, the blood type analysis, the forged birth certificate, the hospital record showing a single birth. I was an elaborate fiction, created by my parents for reasons I couldn't begin to fathom. You have genetic markers we would expect to see in Gerald Harris's biological child. Monica Harris cannot be your biological mother. My father had an affair, it was the only explanation. I was his son but not hers, and Roland, the golden boy, he was a stranger, a total stranger from Lebanese and Persian descent. The entire Harris legacy, the $90 million, the company, the name, it was all built on a lie. I picked up my phone and stared at Roland's contact photo, him smiling in an $800 cashmere sweater at last year's Christmas party. My brother, did he know? If they knew this was all fake, I'd mumbled to Dr. Reeves, then the will makes sense. I had to know. I drove home, the 4-hour trip passing in a fog of rage and confusion. I got to my apartment, scanned every document Dr. Reeves gave me and uploaded them to 3 separate, secure cloud servers. I charged my phone and double-checked the voice recording app. If Roland knew the truth, I was going to get it on record. Not for a court, the will was ironclad, but for me, for my own sanity. At 7 p.m. I called him. He answered on the second ring, his voice all business. Clay, I'm in the middle of a board meeting, can this wait? No, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. We need to talk in person tonight. I've got the Riverside presentation tomorrow, It's about Mom and Dad, I cut him off. I let the silence hang for a beat, then I delivered the line I knew would work. And about 1982. The silence on the other end was heavy and absolute. When he finally spoke, the arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by a voice I'd never heard before. It was small and scared. Where are you? On my way, Margaret Holmes. No, she's at her mother's. Come to the house, I'll be waiting. Just before he hung up, he added, Clay, how much do you know? I hung up without answering, let him sweat. Let him wonder for the first time in his life what it felt like to not be in control. The gates to Roland's estate slid open. I drove my modest car up the long, curving driveway, past the fountains and sculptures that cost more than my apartment. The mansion was lit up, a monument to a legacy that was, I now knew, a complete fabrication. Roland opened the front door before I even stepped out of the car. He looked awful. His perfect hair was a mess, his shirt untucked. The mask was off. You went to Helix, he said. It wasn't a question. Are you knows? He didn't answer. He just turned and walked toward his study. I followed him past the gallery of family portraits, our parents on their wedding day, Roland at Harvard, the two of us as children in matching outfits looking nothing alike. How had I never seen it? His study was designed to intimidate, all dark wood and leather. But tonight the room felt like a stage set. He'd already poured 2 whiskeys, the good stuff, the 50-year-old scotch our father saved for special occasions. Seemed appropriate, Roland said, handing me a glass. His hand was trembling. Dad always said this was for when the truth needed telling. So you know, I said, placing the copies of the DNA reports on his antique desk. You know we're not brothers. Roland let out a short, bitter laugh. I've known for 3 years. My grip tightened on the glass. 3 years, you've known for 3 years. What was I supposed to say, Clay? He shot back. Hey, by the way, our entire childhood is a lie. Mom and Dad aren't our parents, and everything we believe about this family is phi. Say Dion. Yes, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. That is exactly what you should have said. He walked to the massive window overlooking his perfect life. I found out when Margaret and I were trying IVF, my fertility tests. They revealed some interesting facts about my genetic heritage. I hired a PI, it took him 8 months. He turned to face me, his eyes filled with a fear I'd never seen in him. The truth is worse than you're imagining, Clay. I pulled out my phone and hit record, placing it on the desk between us. Tell me everything. He looked at the phone, then nodded. He went to the massive safe behind his desk, spun the combination, and pulled out a thick, old manila envelope. Mom's lawyer gave this to me after the will, reading her instructions. I was to read it alone. He tossed it on the desk. It read, for Roland, the truth about February 1982. Your biological mother, Roland said, was a woman named Diane Novick. She was Dad's secretary from 1980 to 1982. He had an affair. She got pregnant. You were born 2 days before me. She died from complications right after delivery. My mother's died. Dad panicked. Mom was due with me any day. He convinced her to raise you as my twin. They paid off hospital staff, forged your birth certificate, but she could never look at you without seeing the affair. You were her obligation. So I am his son, I whispered. I'm the only real Harris. That's what I thought too, Roland said, his voice cracking. Until I read Mom's letter. The fertility clinic made a mistake with her IVF, a sample mix-up. I'm not Dad's biological son either. My biological father was some Lebanese med student who donated sperm. The room spun, so neither of us. Neither of us, Roland confirmed. I'm a stranger, but you are Gerald Harris's biological son, the true heir, he paused. And they gave everything to me. He reached back into the safe and pulled out another folder. And there's one more thing, Diane Novick, your mother. She came from money, Clay, serious money. Her father owned Novick International Freight. She left everything to you, a massive trust. Dad buried it, hid it from you for 42 years. It's all there, waiting for you. I stared at the man I had called my brother for 42 years. He was a stranger just like me. Both of us were victims of our parents' elaborate, cruel fiction. Why, I finally asked, why tell me this? You could have kept the money, all of it. Because I've spent 3 years living with this, he yelled, tears welling in his eyes. I inherited a fortune that belongs to the only person with actual Harris blood. And don't you get it, Clay? The sickest part, they knew I wasn't theirs. The clinic mix-up. They found out when I was 5, and they loved me more anyway. They chose the stranger over their own flesh and blood. What does that say about them? What does that say about family? He was sobbing now, the perfect son completely broken. I'm nobody's son, Clay, not really. You're the only family I have. In that moment, the 42 years of resentment evaporated. He wasn't the golden boy, he was just as lost as I was. I walked over and did something I'd never done. I hugged him. 2 weeks later, Roland called. I'm setting up a trust, he said. Half of everything, it's yours, it should have always been yours. I don't want it, Roland, I said, and I meant it. Then what do you want? I want us to be brothers for real this time, by choice. We started meeting every Sunday, not at his mansion but at a Greasy Spoon diner halfway between our homes. We talked, really talked. I quit my job and used the first dividend from my real inheritance, the Novick Trust, to go back to school. A month later, Dr. Reeves called. She'd found my mother's sister, my Aunt Ruth. I met her in Seattle. She had my eyes, my smile. She gave me a box of photos and a letter written by my mother, Diane, the day before she died. A letter to the son she'd never meet, full of hopes that I would be kind, that I would be honest, and that I would know I was loved. Roland and I found a different arrangement. We used money from both the Harris estate and the Novick Trust to create the Diane Novick Foundation, helping children caught in the middle of adult deceptions. Last year, Margaret and Roland finally had a baby, a boy. They asked me to be the godfather. You're the only real family this kid will have, Roland said. They named him Gerald Clayton Harris, not after our father, after us. Standing in that hospital, holding my nephew, who isn't really my nephew, watching my brother, who isn't really my brother, I finally understood our parents were wrong. Love isn't written in DNA, it's written in choices, the choice to show up, the choice to forgive, the choice to build a real family from the wreckage of a fake one. That's the real inheritance. And it's worth more than $90 million.